Hi, longtime lurker here. I never thought I'd share my story here, though it should have been obvious to me from the start. But hindsight is 20/20 and all that. I, 33 male, have been married to my wife, call her Patricia, 34 female, for 8 years now. I won't say it's always been perfect since no relationship is, but it was great at the start. I always tried to be the best man I could for her, and she was a loving partner in her way too. For some background, I'm currently between careers. I've done custodial work most of my life. The pay isn't great, but the job security is alright. I've been with the same agency for years now, and I've never had to worry about work. I don't make much though, so I've been taking night classes to get ready for a career change. My wife, on the other hand, is a high-powered, ambitious businesswoman who works in finance. When we got married, she was about to get her MBA and pinched pennies with me while applying for every internship she could find. Once she got her foot in the door, she shot up the corporate ladder like a firework. Now she's doing very well for herself. She's the kind of person who everyone listens to at her work. She wears expensive suits and jewelry and drives a nice car. I was happy for her success. At first, I never thought the fact that she earned more than me would pose any problems to our relationship, and it didn't, for a while. I'm not a slacker by any means. I work a full-time job and I take night classes too. At first, she supported me. She was even the one who encouraged me to take classes and get a better career. But a few months ago, I started to see a side of her I'd never seen before. For example, there was a day I'd been playing some video games to unwind before I had to head out to class. I just wrapped up a stressful shift and I didn't have enough time to catch a quick nap, so I freshened up and played a quick round of Overwatch to unwind. That's when she came in and snapped at me for gaming while I was still a failure. Well, that hurt a lot, and it was quite unlike what I was used to with her. It was a shock to me. I told her I was doing my best. I'd just gotten off of a shift and needed to unwind before heading right out to class. She called me a lazy bum. I called her a cold witch, and we went back and forth like that for a while. It wasn't pretty. This fight stuck in my mind because I had to leave after a few minutes to catch up with my class, and when I got back, she acted like it never happened. The lack of an apology left me sore for a while, but I moved on. At the time, I thought it was work stress leaking into our home. She has a lot of subordinates in her department, so she's used to demanding excellence. I didn't want to be one of those guys who put up with disrespect and got walked all over, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt too. About a month ago, it became pretty clear that it wasn't about work. Her personality changed towards me almost overnight. She started picking fights over meaningless things. We fought a few times over what I chose to wear, what I did in my spare time, and even once how I'd addressed a waiter. She'd also started making these nasty comments that were supposed to sound innocent, but it was obvious she was belittling me. If I asked her about her day, she might end up telling me about some male coworker and how much she admired him for being a real man and providing for his family. Let me remind you, I'm not a bum. I work hard at my job and cover my share at home. I try to better myself as much as I can. I just don't make as much as she does. These comments would lead to us having another argument, and we'd go at it for hours. It might sound weird, but I started to get the feeling that she was enjoying these fights. Afterwards, she'd always act like nothing ever happened. There were some women who think peaceful relationships can get boring and they start trying to instigate things. It felt like one of those. By this point, I realized I'd found myself in a toxic relationship. I considered couples counseling because I truly wanted this relationship to work, despite her recent behavior. We had many good years together, and I didn't want to give up without at least trying. But then she reached a new low. She got bolder with her passive-aggressive digs and started making suggestive comments. She talked loudly on the phone about how she needed someone who could keep up with her lifestyle or excite her. Whenever I challenged her about these statements, she would gaslight me, saying I was overreacting or missing context. The thing is, she was so good at this that I actually started to question myself. I hated being in my own home and dreaded coming home from work some days. I know I shouldn't have stuck around, but I was trying to be optimistic about repairing our relationship. There was an evening when she came home tipsy from a work dinner. She was in a good mood, so I asked how her dinner went. She started telling me how jealous she was of her coworkers' wives because they knew how to show a woman a good time. I'm pretty sure that was the day when things got worse. The beginning of the end, as I like to call it, started when she left her work laptop open and I happened to see an email. She'd been working in the living room right beside me, and she went to grab something from the bedroom. I wasn't prying, but I happened to look over at her screen and the email was right there. That wasn't like her. She was usually super careful about keeping sensitive work information private. The email was flirty but vague, easy for her to defend if I confronted her about it. I imagined asking her about it, and I could already see how she would gaslight me until I started feeling guilty again. I told myself it was nothing and decided to ignore it. When she came back, I pretended I hadn't seen anything, and we went through the rest of the day normally. I tried to forget about that incident, but then it happened again. It was an email to the same guy. She talks about him all the time. Let's just call him Chad, because she always makes him out to be some perfect Chad type. She mentioned being bored all the time at home, and Chad replied, "At least work is always exciting." She'd replied with a winky face. Two things went through my mind. The first was that she was either cheating on me or she had a work husband situation going on, which isn't much better. The second was that she was leaving these messages around for me to find on purpose. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't have any other explanation. No one takes confidentiality more seriously than she does, but suddenly she was leaving emails and work messages open. This time I took a picture of the messages with my phone. I wasn't going to confront her again because I was planning to wait and see if she would do this again. If she kept doing it, I would compile all the evidence until I was sure of what was going on. Well, it's been 3 weeks since then, and there's no doubt that she wants me to see these messages. She was leaving her laptop and phone unlocked and lying around with messages open for me to see. Chad is the worst, but there are 2 other guys as well. She was flirty with the other guys, but they kept things professional, completely ignoring her advances. That was a small relief, but it didn't change the fact that she was seeking attention from other men. Chad went just as hard as she did on the flirting though, which made me mad. The reason I decided to share all of this is because it just clicked for me a few days ago. All of the snide comments, berating everything I did, and leaving these messages around for me to find. It was her playing some sick game with me. I bet it wasn't even about cheating. She just wanted to get a reaction from me. Maybe she wanted to drive me crazy, or she wanted me to explode so she could gaslight me some more. I think she's doing all of this for her amusement. Can someone tell me if that makes sense, or am I just being paranoid? If she really is toying with me, then I'm not going to play her game. I won't give her the satisfaction. I've been collecting evidence of all the messages and I'm building my case for the confrontation. When I finally throw this in her face, I want to make sure she has zero chance of gaslighting me. Wow, leaving her laptop open? That's her version of a boss fight. Instead of sneakily leveling up her infidelity, she's dangling it in front of you, OP. You're not paranoid. My guy, you're just stuck in this toxic game that Patricia plays with you. You deserve better than someone who plays with your emotions and disrespects you. Stay strong and don't doubt yourself. You've already seen enough to know something's seriously off. Update 1. Well, somehow things got worse between the original post and now. The original messages didn't stop. Instead, they got more blatant. If I was studying, she'd come over to talk to me for a bit, then drop her phone on my desk. If I was gaming, she'd sit with me on the couch and leave her phone on the coffee table. She'd always have this infuriating smirk on her face while she was leaving, like we were both in on what she was doing. It's like since I couldn't be the rich husband she wanted, she was going to turn me into some kind of plaything. Whenever she wasn't around, I'd use the opportunity to go through her phone and collect whatever evidence I could. I know I said I wouldn't confront her until I had all the evidence I needed, but I broke down one day. The stress and anxiety of living through this situation was ruining me. I couldn't sleep, and I had trouble focusing on my classes. I dreaded coming home from work, and then one day I saw a message from Chad that said, "Last night was amazing. Miss you." The night before, she had come home late, saying she was needed after work. I tried to stay calm after collecting the evidence, but I lost my temper. I just wasn't in a good headspace to control my anger anymore. I burst into the living room with her phone and screamed at her. I asked if she'd slept with Chad, and she just laughed at me. "And what if I did?" Then she asked me if I'd even had the balls to leave her. She said I couldn't do anything about it because I needed her. Any hope I'd had of repairing our relationship was gone. She saw me more as some pathetic worm who couldn't fight back against her. True, I'd been taking it on the chin for the past few weeks, but that was because I was gathering evidence. I wasn't rolling over for her. I didn't reply for a while. I just stood there, slack-jawed, and she continued. She said I was lucky to marry up, that I was a failure who needed to support me while I was playing my games and taking my little classes. I still couldn't find the words to say. I mean, what do you say to that? As usual, I knew what she said was untrue. I didn't rely on her. We both contributed to the household. But what she said still cut me deep. You can't imagine what it feels like to hear those words come from someone you thought loved you. I came up from a poor upbringing, and while I wasn't fortunate enough to bag an MBA from a fancy school, I was doing my best with what I had. I had even stopped talking to her about my classes because she always found some way to dampen my excitement. I felt so alone in that moment. She just kept going. She said I was boring and weak, and that the most fun she'd had recently was watching me squirm while she rubbed her affair. Yes, she said that word herself, in my face. Yes, she was banging Chad from work, and he made her feel more alive than I ever had. Great. There's something freeing about finally knowing where you stand with someone. When I thought she loved me, her actions made me feel terrible. But now that I knew she hadn't loved me in a long while, her words were losing their edge. I realized I didn't care what she thought of me. I didn't care how she felt. In fact, I wanted her to suffer for the way she treated me. I told her to shut up, and she did. She had this aggravating smirk on her face, though. Then I told her I wasn't going to play her games. I let her know that I hadn't said anything because I was recording every message she showed me. I was digging into her messages and collecting videos and photos she'd shared, and the dates and times of the comments she'd made. I told her that I was going to divorce her and ruin her. I think that surprised her, because first she had pushed out a forced laugh, and then after a bit, she just stared at me and said, "Wait, you can't leave me." I turned around and went upstairs to pack my stuff. I wanted to show her I was serious, that I wasn't the codependent loser she was making me out to be. She followed me around while I packed up my essentials. She didn't shut up the whole time. She alternated between throwing insults and telling me all the reasons I couldn't leave her, but she didn't apologize once. I didn't get the sense of an ounce of guilt from her, and that strengthened my resolve. If I couldn't feel guilt, I'd make her feel regret. When I turned to leave, she planted herself in the doorway and refused to move, saying that I wasn't going to humiliate her by walking out on our marriage. I just edged past her and didn't respond. I was done with words. As soon as I left, I drove to a friend's place to stay the night. I'm there now, plotting my next move. I know I'm going through with the divorce, but I want to make her pay. How can I get back at this woman who destroyed my confidence in my life? My mental health has been impacted way more than I should have let it be, so I have to make sure I make it hurt her. It's clear she went out of her way to chip away at your self-worth, and the fact that she's been reveling in your pain says a lot more about her character than yours. The ultimate revenge is building a life without her in it, showing her that she didn't break you, that you're stronger and better off without her. That said, there are still practical things you can do to protect yourself and ensure she doesn't get the upper hand. You've been smart about gathering evidence, and now it's time to put that to use. Lawyer up, OP. Don't play her games any longer. Update 2. The past few months have been hell for me, but it's a different kind of hell from before, and in the end I came out happier than I could have imagined. As promised, my wife was served divorce papers. She called me later saying she refused to sign them because she knew I was just lashing out. She said she'd give me some time to cool down and think about it. I just told her not to hold her breath. After a few days, she called again and said we should talk about it. I reminded her that we talked already, and there was nothing more to say. Then she said I had proved my point and that I should come home. I didn't respond to her attempts to manipulate me. I knew she was embarrassed to have me walk out on her. She didn't feel any remorse at all. All the time she called me and tried to convince me to come home, she hadn't apologized once. Like she always did, she was trying to pretend our last confrontation hadn't happened at all. In a way, I was glad she hadn't apologized. It meant I didn't need to feel bad when I finally got back at her. And I planned to get back at her in a big way. The divorce was just the beginning. My lawyer suggested filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity based on the amount of evidence I had. We filed a restraining order to keep her from coming around and harassing me during the process. While the legal side was in motion, I got to work on my next step. Patricia was obsessed with her career and reputation. She was a power player in her company, and she did her best to keep her name clean. I spent a night compiling all of my evidence into an email. The messages with Chad and her 2 other colleagues were the centerpiece, but I made sure to include the details of how she had left her work laptop unsecured. I included a few emails and documents that I could tell were sensitive as well. I sent a group email to all her coworkers at once. How did I get all of her coworkers' emails? I copied the emails down along with the other sensitive information I'd grabbed. At the time, I thought it was just her coworkers, but I found out later that some clients were on the list too. Looking back at it, I should have known that, but it wouldn't have changed my decision. It worked in my favor because it meant the company would have a harder time burying a scandal involving their star employee. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. I thought Patricia would call me, but 3 hours after I sent out the email, she was banging on my door. She was screaming hysterically, saying that I'd ruined her life. I told her through the door that she was violating the restraining order and that I would call the police. She kept screaming and demanding that I open the door. If my lawyer had been around, he would have told me to call the police and keep the door shut. But he wasn't around and I wanted to gloat a little bit. I opened the door, holding my phone up to record. I made sure it was obvious I was recording and told her I'd reported the restraining order violation to the police. She ignored the phone and screamed, "Do you know what you've done to me? I can't come back from this." She looked completely deranged. My always perfectly groomed wife had her hair all over the place. Her makeup was blotchy and ruined, and her eyes were red from crying. She looked like a witch out of a cheap horror movie. Judging by the fact that she was here in her work clothes in the middle of the day, I guessed that she had been fired, or at the very least, suspended. I just looked at her and felt nothing for her except immense satisfaction from seeing the perfect woman broken down completely, and knowing I was responsible for her downfall. The same woman who'd laughed in my face when I confronted her about her betrayal. I wanted to laugh back in her face, but all I said was, "Am I still boring?" She didn't answer me. She just attacked me. She scratched my face and then grabbed me. I dropped my phone in the scuffle and had to use one hand to hold her head back from me. I'm not certain, but I think she was trying to bite me. I'm basically heavier than her, so I was able to push her away from me and close the door between us. She hadn't hurt me much, but I made sure to record the scratches on my face and neck. Meanwhile, she kept pounding on the door until the police arrived a few minutes later. She was taken away, and I had to answer some questions. I made sure to report the assault. After that, the divorce went smoothly, for me. She had the money to hire a great lawyer, but she was a disaster of a client. There was history of infidelity, a violated restraining order, and evidence of verbal and physical assault that supported my prior claims of psychological torment. She never stood a chance. She tried to get alimony from me, but my lawyer fought that down brilliantly. He pointed out that she had a higher income than me, but was still trying to get money from a man that she had psychologically abused for months. I didn't end up paying her a penny. After the divorce was finalized, I felt free. For the first time in months, I was free from her criticism, from her mind games, and from the toxic energy that had started destroying my well-being. Of course, there's a lot of pain to work through, and I'm still going to therapy to help put my sense of self-worth back together. The effects of living with someone like that don't go away overnight. Patricia, on the other hand, ruined her entire career. I found out that she'd been removed from her company for being reckless with confidential information and for having multiple inappropriate relationships at work. I heard from a mutual friend that she was trying to start over in another city, but her reputation had followed her. Employers are great at digging into a candidate's history these days, and she had an arrest record now. She'd applied for several junior-level positions, but with essentially no luck anywhere. As for me, I've completed my night classes and I'm already working on changing careers. I haven't gotten a new job yet, but I've done a few interviews. The interviewers were pretty impressed with me, and I realized just how much I'd let Patricia's opinion skew my perception of myself. Living my life outside of her shadow has shown me just how much potential I really have, and how hard I've been working to achieve it. Your mental health is very important, men. That's all I can say. Don't give any women the power to jeopardize that. I had to learn the hard way.